Right now, the world is holding its breath, and most people watching the news have no idea why they should be scared. A ceasefire between the United States, Israel, and Iran just dropped 2 weeks of pause, and every anchor is treating it like a victory lap. But here's the thing, this ceasefire might not be an ending at all. It might be the quietest, most dangerous beginning we've seen in a generation. If you're learning something here, please hit subscribe. Many of you are aware of what's been happening with the channel. If you feel like supporting, a link in the description. I've spent months researching what's coming between 26 and 2030, and I put it all into an ebook called The Next Global Shift: How to Stay Ahead of Economic Collapse and War, the economies, the conflicts, the moves you need to make. If you want my ebook link in the description to understand what's actually happening, you have to go back further than February of this year, because this moment didn't appear out of nowhere. The 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, collapsed when Trump pulled the United States out in 2018. From that point forward, Iran and America circled each other the way two fighters do when they both know the bell is about to ring. Talks sputtered, tensions climbed, and then in June of 2025, the United States and Israel fought what people now call the 12-day war, sending American bombers into Iranian nuclear facilities before a ceasefire landed on June 24th, mediated by the United States and Qatar. The world exhaled that time too and told itself the crisis was over. What nobody expected was January 2026. Iranian security forces turned on their own citizens during the largest protest movement the country had seen since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, killing tens of thousands of people in the streets. Trump's response came fast, the largest American military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. By mid-February, the United States and Iran sat across a negotiating table again. Indirect nuclear talks running through Oman, and the Omani foreign minister publicly said real progress was being made. Trump called it something he was not thrilled with. The talks dissolved. The decision, it turned out, had already been made somewhere else. February 28, 2026 arrived, and at 6:35 in the morning, UTC U.S. Central Command announced airstrikes against Iran, nearly 900 of them compressed into 12 hours. The Americans named their operation Epic Fury, and the Israelis named theirs Roaring Lion. Together, they threw B-2 stealth bombers, B-1 Lancers, B-52 Stratofortresses, Tomahawk missiles, and HIMARS launchers at a country that had been under sanctions for 45 years. 9 minutes after the American strikes began, at 6:45 UTC, Israeli jets launched what they described as decapitation strikes, and Ali Khamenei, 86 years old, supreme leader of Iran since 1989, died at his compound alongside his daughter, his son-in-law, his grandchild, and his daughter-in-law. 40 days of national mourning followed. Khamenei wasn't the only one. The Iranian defense minister died in those strikes. The IRGC commander, the Defense Council secretary, 4 top Ministry of Intelligence officials. The IDF confirmed the deaths of 7 senior Iranian security leaders before the warning was out. Somewhere in the south of Iran, near Bandar Abbas, a girls' school took a hit that killed approximately 170 people. The American and Israeli explanation was that the school sat adjacent to a military base and that a misfired air defense missile caused the strike. Iran called it deliberate. By evening, the Iranian Red Crescent reported 201 dead and 747 wounded across 24 provinces. And Iran's retaliation was already in the air, drones and ballistic missiles heading toward Israel, toward American bases in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, with a drone connecting to Britain's Ackroyd base in Cyprus and missiles getting shot down over Turkey. 3 American service members died that day. The first U.S. casualties of the conflict and the war had fully irreversibly begun. What most people sitting in America missed completely was the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, through which flows roughly 20% of the entire world's oil supply every single day. Iran shut it down, and the numbers tell the story bluntly. On February 26, 2 days before the war started, AAA recorded the national average for a gallon of regular gas at 298. By April 2026, that number had cleared $4 per gallon for the first time since August 2022, a nearly 39% spike in roughly 5 weeks, with crude oil surging past $100 a barrel. Japan's prime minister warned publicly that a closed strait would drain his country's oil supply within 8 to 9 months, collapsing the Japanese economy with it. India pulls 60% of its oil from that region, China 40%. None of this is a Middle Eastern problem in isolation. It lands in your gas tank, your grocery bill, your heating cost. Whether you have ever looked at a map of the Persian Gulf or not, replacing Khamenei turned out to be the part that should have worried everyone most. Iran's assembly of experts named Mohammad Khamenei, 56 years old, the dead leader's son, as the new supreme leader, and Trump called him an unacceptable choice almost immediately. What analysts noted was the detail that mattered. Mohammad Mohabba ran close to the Revolutionary Guard and carried a reputation for being even more hostile toward the United States than his father. His opening declaration as supreme leader was to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. This was not a softer Iran emerging from the wreckage of its old leadership. This was a harder one. By early April, the toll of the conflict had accumulated into numbers that demand attention. Iran had fired more than 5,000 drones, over 2,000 ballistic missiles, and more than 50 cruise missiles, according to statistics from the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. Qatar, one of the world's top natural gas producers, announced it would take years to restore its output after Iranian strikes shredded its energy infrastructure. Gulf Arab nations that had spent decades building reputations as safe, wealthy, stable hubs for global business watched that reputation dissolve in real time. Then came April 7th, 2026. Trump posted on Truth Social before his 8:00 p.m. Eastern deadline, and his words were verbatim, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." Congressional Democrats called it a potential war crime. Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope, stood in St. Peter's Square and called for peace, describing attacks on civilian infrastructure as a sign of the hatred, the division, the destruction. Less than 2 hours before that deadline expired, Pakistan brokered a ceasefire with Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif's government operating as the go-between for Washington and Tehran. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi publicly thanked Sharif. Behind the scenes, China delivered the final nudge that pushed Iran to accept. Trump's Truth Social post read, "This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East." Iran's Supreme National Security Council confirmed the deal and claimed victory in the same breath, declaring that nearly all war objectives had been achieved. Markets responded within minutes. Brent crude dropped more than 13%, landing at 9,474, and the Dow Jones climbed 1,300 points, its best single session since April 2025. But here's the thing about that exhale. The ceasefire started cracking before the ink dried. Lebanon became the fault line almost immediately. Within hours of the announcement, Netanyahu's office confirmed that Israel's government supported Trump's decision to pause strikes on Iran for 2 weeks and then added one sentence that changed everything. The ceasefire did not include Lebanon. Israel launched Operation Eternal Darkness against Hezbollah that same day, its largest strike since the war began, leaving 254 people dead across Lebanon and 165 wounded, with 92 of those deaths concentrated in Beirut alone. By April 8th, at least 182 more people died in central Beirut from Israeli strikes that landed after the ceasefire was supposedly active. Iran responded by threatening to hit Israel if the assault on Lebanon did not stop. An Iranian media report stated that the Strait of Hormuz's reopening, the actual foundation of the entire ceasefire agreement, had been paused because of those Lebanese strikes. Shahbaz Sharif, the man who built this deal, publicly condemned the violations and urged every party to exercise restraint and respect the ceasefire for 2 weeks as agreed upon so that diplomacy can take a lead role. And Iran's Supreme National Security Council put out a statement that deserves to be read slowly. "Our hands are on the trigger, and the moment the enemy makes the slightest mistake, it will be met with full force." Underneath all of that sits a nuclear question, unresolved and immovable. All of Iran's highly enriched uranium remained inside the country, likely entombed at the enrichment sites American bombers struck during the 12-day war the previous June. Trump stated that the United States would work with Iran to dig up and remove that uranium, and Iran offered no confirmation of that plan. Trump and Netanyahu demanded complete dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program and Iran's 10-point peace proposal. The document Tehran submitted as its terms for the ceasefire rejected that demand outright. What started this whole conflict, the thing every press conference cited as a justification for nearly 900 strikes in a single morning, remained completely unresolved. None of that mattered to the Pentagon's budget request, which came in at more than $200 billion in additional war funding, a number that signals the United States government is not planning for a short conflict. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told the Senate that Iran's conventional military capabilities have largely been destroyed, and then added the part that most headlines buried. The regime appears intact. Here is what this war has cost the people who had the least say in it. Across Lebanon, more than 600 people have died and over 1 million have been displaced. More than 1/6 of the country's entire population uprooted. The IMF's chief warned that every 10% increase in energy prices over 2026 is expected to push global inflation up by nearly 0.5%. That means your costs climb whether the missiles land near you or not. 2 weeks? That is the window. This ceasefire opened 2 weeks for two sides that each declare total victory to sit down and negotiate something permanent, with a new Iranian supreme leader more hostile than the last, with Lebanon actively burning despite the agreement, with a Strait of Reopening hanging by a thread, and with a $200 billion Pentagon funding request quietly suggesting that someone in Washington has already planned for what comes next. Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged both sides to respect the ceasefire and expressed hope it would be extended. The world is watching, and the question was never really whether the ceasefire would hold. The question is what the world looks like when it does not. This is the video today.